Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. We are quarantined and I figured it would be a very good use of my time to show you all how to make a good self-tape on any budget, from very cheap to very expensive, and all of the different self-tape setups that I've used over the years. But first we're gonna go through some general self-tape rules and then we'll get into my self-tape setups. And yeah, that's what's happening today. Thanks for joining me, let's do it. Alright, so real quick, as promised, before we get into any of my self-tape setup, I want to talk to you guys about some self-tape rules. First, film in landscape mode, so horizontally, not vertically. You want to use a plain background, preferably one that's off-white, even though a lot of my earlier self-tapes were all done on white backgrounds. Alright, the next thing you need to do is make sure you're filming in a quiet location. So turn off the AC or any fans, anything that's really loud that could be distracting at all. And as you frame yourself, be sure to frame yourself from mid-belly to just above your head. Lastly, follow the casting director's instructions on how to film your self-tape. Each self-tape might be different, and who knows, they may be asking for you to film it vertically. So just be sure to read all those instructions, and yeah, then you can get on with your self-tape. All right, enough of that. Let's get on to my self-tape setup number 1. All right, self-tape setup number 1 consists of a smartphone and a GorillaPod. Super cheap, super basic, but it works. I filmed a ton of self-tapes using just a little iPhone GorillaPod and a coat rack. So this little piece I carry with me when I travel because you can put it on tons of stuff and just put your iPhone or whatever smartphone you have on that actual tripod, and it works really well. As you can tell, the sound is good, the light is good. I'm not even using any external lights, I'm just using natural light that's coming in, as well as we have a bunch of white lights in this room. So if you are doing a self-tape on a budget, just make sure that you have some white lights in the room because it'll keep the colors correct in your video. I'm not using any of my backdrops in this setup because I want to give you guys an exact replication of the way I used to do my self-tapes, which was just on a nice blank wall. So this is self-tape setup number 1, and it is super reasonable. Again, it's just the cost of an iPhone tripod and a smartphone if you have one. And honestly, I've been doing this with phones that were a lot older and it was fine. So even if it's an older phone or not a fancy iPhone X, that's fine. It's not a big deal. I just want to show you guys that it really doesn't have to break the bank to make a good self-tape. So while this self-tape setup is cheap and effective, I still think there's some room to be improved on, and that's why we're going to move to self-tape setup number 2. Let's do it. This is self-tape setup number 2. This was the same self-tape setup I've used for a really long time. For like a bunch of years, and these are actually really reasonable lights from Amazon. I'll link them down below. This is probably the most cost-effective way to improve your setup. It was at this point in my acting career that I did upgrade to a Canon camera to record my self-tapes on, and I bought a little microphone as well, a little shotgun mic, but again, you do not need that. Also, I later upgraded to a Rode video mic. It's a little bit more expensive, but it sounds a bit better, and I use it for most of my YouTube videos. So if you're looking for a new microphone, that would be a good place to start. The big points with self-tape setup number 2 are that you just need a tripod that can hold the camera at your eye height. So if you're a taller person, you may need to make sure that you get a taller tripod. We bought a cheaper tripod that wasn't tall enough, and then we had to upgrade to this big boy. I just recommend, in terms of the tripods, that you find something that can pan up and down if you have any sort of slate you need to do. So again, depending on how much you put into the tripod or the lights, you're looking at anywhere from $100 to $400 upgrading your setup. So that really isn't too much more to spend in terms of getting a great self-tape look. So this is what self-tape setup number 2 looks like on camera. As you can see, it's definitely better than self-tape setup number 1, but not enough that a casting director would be mad if you used either of them. And this is a totally reasonable setup. Again, using a smartphone or a digital camera, either way. I like to use a digital camera because it's easier for me to edit after the fact. This is self-tape setup number 2, and with all that, let's get into self-tape setup number 3. Hello. Welcome to self-tape setup number 3. This is my current setup. This is a little overkill. So when you see the price of all this stuff, just know that Andy and I are YouTubers, so a lot of this equipment was bought for that express reason. However, if we have it, we might as well use it, and this is my current self-tape setup. And that was the GoPro turning off. First of all, the big change was installing these photography paper rolls. These are from Amazon, although the copper pipe is just from Lowe's. We cut them down to size and we hung them here, and they're really great, they're really versatile. They're about 30 bucks a roll, so $90 here. This light, the Aperture 120D, this is an almost $800 light. So you don't need an $800 light to light your self-tapes. I like that I can change the dim setting very easily right here. Look at that. And all the way up. I like to keep it at a little bit more of a softer light. It doesn't need to be super intense at around like 67. And then over here we have our Diva ring light. Now the Diva ring light is a pretty cost-effective way to mimic something like the Aperture 120D in that it's also dimmable. I'm using is just an extra fill light. So normally this would be the only light you'd be using and you'd stick your camera in here. But again, because of the situation, because we already have the Aperture 120D and we don't have two of them, we're using this one as our fill light. The Aperture 120D we're using as our key light. Again, I'm using a 3-point lighting setup. Those of you who have watched my reel video understand the 3-point lighting setup a little bit better. For those who don't know, I'll link a video down below, but basically the long and the short of it is you need a key light, which is just off of your camera, and then you need a fill light, which is just on the other side, and then about 180 degrees away from that, you have your backlight, something that fills in the background. That way you are separated from the background when you shoot. All right, this is self-tape setup number 3, and it looks pretty good, right? Not too bad. But the good thing is, all of these aren't that different. Again, you really don't have to spend a lot of money to make a great self-tape. Here's a brief comparison of all of my self-tape setups. So this is self-tape setup number 1, and it is super reasonable. Again, it's just the cost of an iPhone tripod and a smartphone. So this is what self-tape setup number 2 looks like on camera. As you can see, it's definitely better than self-tape setup number 1, but not enough that a casting director would be mad if you used either of them. This is self-tape setup number 3. This is my current setup. This is what I use for just about every self-tape I do now. And it looks pretty good, right? Not too bad. So if you're just starting out, here's what I recommend. First, the $65 umbrella lights are amazing and cheap, and you can do a 3-point lighting setup with it. After that, I would maybe consider getting the ring light if you're up for it, but I wouldn't stress it. Second, I would get a decent tripod for whatever camera you're using, be it smartphone or camera. Just make sure it is tall enough to hit your eyes and pan up and down. Number 3, if you are getting a camera, try to make sure it's one that you can plug a mic into. And finally, consider getting a pop-up backdrop. A nice clean background is always helpful when you're doing a self-tape. Thank you so much for joining me, and if you need any extra info, please check out my acting playlist. I have tons and tons of content there. It will probably answer most of your questions at this point. So check that out, subscribe, like this video if you thought it was helpful, and share it around if you have actor friends who are wondering how to do a self-tape. So thank you so much. Again, stay safe, and yeah.